Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Good to see you today as our co-host.
How are you this Monday, Dr. Paul?
I am doing fine, ready and raring to go.
That's right.
And I think we can still say there's a breaking out of good news. At least it's dribbling out right now. And yet it seems like, and this should be expected, the more good news that comes out for our side, that people are waking up and saying, hey, what's the government doing to us? Whether it's the federal government, whether it's the United Nations, or whether it's their mayor.
Yeah.
People are waking up, and I think this is great. And yet the officials are going to buckle down. You know, they double down on this, and they become more authoritarian. You know, there was one report that this was a good report, even though it was a bad report. That I think there were names put on Facebook or someplace. There were 900 individuals who had been the snitchers.
Yeah.
And you know, their names got on there, which they deserved.
Yeah.
But the snitchers were pretty unhappy, and the people who had got hold of it weren't happy with them either. So there's a limit to how far they go. I don't know why people get a big thrill out of snitching, but they do. They feel important or something, even though it's for, you know, so obviously ridiculous reason. You know, one of other ones, they sent 1,000 cops out. The mayor's 1,000 cops out of New York City. Did you know that they were barbecuing they didn't have a government permit? They didn't have their, a badge that says that they've had the immunity and that they were safe. But they came out, and it's to me, and I mentioned that the other day, it's almost like they hate people who look like they're having fun in spite of what we're doing to them. They still want to have fun, which is pretty bad. But no, there are a lot of good stories out there, people resisting, but there's a lot of bad stories out there that the government just gets more ornery and more authoritarian. And of course, the big challenge is going to be is how do we get out of this? Because it isn't just the issue, should governments be authoritarian and doing things they shouldn't be doing, but how are we going to convince the people exactly why this country is broke and how we work our way out of it? But in some ways that might work to our benefit, because maybe it'll get to the point where more and more people will realize, I can't even depend on my government to take care of me from cradle to grave. So I might have to do something else. I might have to learn how to go hunting and put some food on the table. So that I think is a good event, because it has to occur that the people lose their confidence in the government being the caretaker and taking care of everybody, because they can't do it. That's what gave us this. And right now, I think we're seeing the reversal, because on the surface, for the practicality of it, what they've been doing is wrong, and they're now speaking out. Why can't I do this? Why can't I get my hair cut? And why does a big company with 150 people, 200 people, and it seems like they're back at work, and somebody else that has a shop with 3 people in, they can't do it. They see such the unfairness of it all, and you don't know. Is it political? Could be. Is it just mismanagement? Yeah, most likely. But it's never fair when they close something down artificially, and it's never fair when they pretend that they're going to open up the door again. I don't know why they don't have a little more confidence in liberty and let the people decide, because I think not only does that protect the principles of liberty, it also is more efficient. But so far, I think we're sort of making a turning point and moving in a different direction, but we have a ways to go.
We do. And, you mentioned those snitchers. What I found interesting is one of those snitchers, and this, I'm sure, is the case very, very often. One of the snitchers actually called and turned in her own boss because her boss wanted to keep the business open, and she wanted to be unemployed because she wanted that extra $600 a month. Oh, so she anonymously called and turned in her boss and tried to get him in trouble. And I think this really underscores how deeply psychologically damaging it is for a society where people are encouraged to snitch on each other. And we saw this from East Germany, because after the end of that's sort of the greatest state of snitching ever. And after the end of the Berlin Wall, people began to browse the Stasi archives, and they found out, my mother, my brother, my pastor, my neighbor, they were all telling on each other. Deeply distrustful, makes it for a deeply deeply sick society, and it's a very, very dangerous thing. But people are desperate, and they are opening their businesses. I know I've been mentioning our friends at Bad S a few times, but I went down to Oyster Creek on Saturday, and there were a couple of hundred freedom and peace-loving people who were helping and protecting this woman. And guess what? The police threatened to arrest her. They didn't even stop by. They knew better than to stop by. And it was a successful demonstration. Now, if this can plant the seed for a lot of other businesses, there's no way they can shut them all down.
Yeah, and the ultimate resistance, if you have to defend your liberty or regain your liberty, is obviously, it does end up with violence, and you have to be protected against the people who will use violence with guns. And people should be prepared, and we have that right, even though a lot of people don't think we have that right. But what my advice is I think it's just fantastic that the real weapon is ideological. Ideas have consequences, but so do pictures.
Yeah.
A picture's worth 1,000 words. How many words is a video worth? There are many pictures, and even 30 seconds sometimes, and it spreads in spite of the restrictions placed on us by social media. They seem to be able to get out there. I don't think there's a monopoly control of the internet, and that's why I'm always hopeful that as time goes on and becomes more necessary to protect our right to get our program out and get our information out, that people will hear. That's why, it's just great. I imagine that you probably saw a few people down there with cameras and cell phones, but if the police didn't come in and cause trouble, no, I think that they should be put on the defensive. And then the police ought to know better. I mean, what good is it to go down there and rough people up and fine them? We've seen these places where people get fined $1,000 because they took a walk in the park. They're just hungry for power, and it's exactly opposite of what local authorities should be doing. Because I was always under the impression that the Constitution is very clear that to protect the local states and others from an abusive federal government, you had the obligation of the state government. That's why they didn't have a 17th Amendment. They were elected by the people, and they should stand up for the states. But at every level of government, the person elected isn't there to manage our lives. That's all they do now. But they were there to watch out for the people's liberty. So if it's a state level, they should be very involved in protecting us from the federal government. But the county sheriffs are supposed to be protecting us from abusive government.
Yeah.
But that has been lost. I hope those ideas are reversed, where governments are supposed to be protecting us. But there's too many in government right now that join the gang. I wonder how many people have joined this whole nonsense that I can write an executive order. Pretty neat, I can do that. I'm a powerful person. And it's just, they walk down the street and they casually just write a law, write a regulation. Well, we're going to change the rules. You can't do that. And, okay, the mayor just said this. And that, of course, is exactly opposite of what they're supposed to do. We're supposed to be able to nullify oppressive laws, whether they're starting from the United Nations, whether it's the federal government, or even county officials and mayors. We should be able to have authority to do this. But then we should have people in government that understands this. But so often we've lived in the welfare state. Most people, even at the national level, haven't worried too much about the warfare state, but they have become dependent. But I think what's interesting, they have to be a little bit nervous, because how can they remain totally confident that the government is going to take care of them? They know that these trillions and trillions of dollars, yes, this week I might get my check, but what are they going to get next year? And the people, and you hear millions of people are saying, all I want to do is go back to work, and I believe them. Yeah. Because that's where you get a sense of satisfaction, and you can be more it could be more reliable than waiting for the next government check, because eventually the checks I've always argued the checks will always come. The big question is, will the check buy anything? Yeah. And I think that's what we're moving into, an era where the checks aren't going to buy very much. And I think a lot of people realize that. For the poor and the middle class, they already can't pay for their rent and things like that. So they just getting the check doesn't solve their problem. So I think we're really in flux right now, and we can go in two different directions. We see these signs that we encourage because people are waking up and saying, I really think this issue of liberty is pretty important. So I'm optimistic to a degree, but also know what the odds are and what kind of people are the authoritarians. And we certainly have come across a lot in this coronavirus. And of course, the authoritarianism associated with the Federal Reserve is pretty bad. But that all has to be reversed.
Well, the people have had enough, and I think the anger is real, and you can sense the anger if you go out and talk to people. You can sense the anger, and groups like Texas Open Carry who are involved in the Oyster Creek, they are peaceful people, but they have had enough, and you're seeing that. But on the other side of that coin, you talk about the sheriffs are supposed to protect their communities. There are sheriffs that are standing up and doing that, and in fact, we have our first clip. This is Sheriff Watts, Eureka County, Nevada. It's a small county, but this is a great little note that he sent his people. And if you don't mind, I'll read a little bit of it, Dr. Paul. This week, Eureka County Sheriff's Office received 2 complaints about people gathering and not social distancing. This is not an emergency or a matter for the deputies. These complaints were due to 15 to 20 people celebrating a birthday and the church hosting an outdoor service. The Constitution of the United States allows us freedom to assemble and the freedom of religion. No emergency declaration that's been signed can take those God-given rights away from us. And he goes on, and this is, he says, from birthday parties to church services, these are the rights of the American people. And just because you don't like what they're doing doesn't mean you're right. You have a choice to stay at home just as they have the right to assemble. In closing, and this is important, Dr. Paul, it is my stance that the men and women of the Eureka County Sheriff's Office will not be taking enforcement action on any of Governor Sisolak's orders, quote unquote, that clearly violate our constitutional rights.
There you
good
go.
Stuff.
Now, he's a good sheriff.
Yeah, he is. And he's not alone. There's the people themselves are rising up. Here's one in Huntington Beach. Remember, Governor Newsom was our villain of the week last week. He said, no, you can't go to the beach. And here's what Huntington Beach said the next day. Oh, yeah? Try to stop us. They showed up in court. There was not a thing he could do. He couldn't arrest all these people. It's impossible. And then the next one will be the final one that I say in this segment, Dr. Paul. This is Sheriff from Maine. The governor up there said, you better wear your face mask if you leave your house or we're going to get you. And there are many sheriffs in Maine, actually, who say, are you kidding? We're not going to enforce this. So it's crumbling. This wall of these authoritarians are building is crumbling before our eyes, and that's something that's very, very uplifting to see.
Well, good. And I think a lot of this started because we have several generations now that either didn't care or didn't understand and didn't look to the Constitution for guidance on what the federal government should be doing. Because when I look at the mess we're in, it didn't come about for natural reasons. It wasn't the weather. It wasn't a hurricane that came in. But whether it's financial, which is something that is pseudo government, is created and permitted to keep that system going of funny money and the Federal Reserve, and also the coronavirus thing. Where did the government get this authority that the federal government especially, that they had total control of quarantines and what medications? So my argument is it starts with the abuse of the restraint of the federal government when they get out of hand and the states don't say anything about it. But I don't think politicians should be involved with medicine. And what do we hear now? We hear the politicians all the time in practice of medicine and everything else. They're always involved with it, and they carry a lot of weight, and they set the stage for this. But what about the doctors should stay out of politics? I mean, to practice their medicine. How do you have a couple doctors in some agency of government come in, and they're made to be the epitome of excellence? They know everything. They have all the wisdom, and you get Dr. Fauci, just stirring up trouble. So, but I think the doctors should be kept out of the political things, and I think the others should just stay out of government too. Your doctors shouldn't be I mean, they're like right now they're deciding what to do with the drugs. Oh, we have one that looks pretty good. We haven't tested it yet. We don't know if it's safe or effective, but we know what to do because we have to move this along.
Yeah.
And why aren't people yelling and screaming about it? Not only do they not have the authority and shouldn't be able to do it, but this is insane. And we can go over, and we've done some on some of the things that have backfired when government ordered vaccines. People die from vaccines at times. Vaccines can save people's lives. But who's going to make these decisions? Should it be Bill Gates? He studied this. He's an expert. So Bill Gates is supposed to decide because he's worked with this. He has companies he knows that manufactures this stuff, and he's dedicated. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that free people and local government, individuals, and nobody with this massive amount of authority in politics or in the bureaucracy should be permitted to have this much authority. When you and I assume responsibility for ourselves, if we make a mistake, it's mostly limited. We suffer the consequences.
Yeah.
When these guys get in government and make the mistakes, everybody suffers, and it's hard to reverse it. And that's what we're trying to get here. And that is why we're a little bit excited about seeing that people are coming alive.
Yeah.
Oh, you can actually use this word freedom and liberty, and they understand. And you know what I think is great is, I've always worked on the issue. I argue the case that liberty brings people together. If you know what liberty is, you don't have to ask any person about their religion or their social conditions or social beliefs or anything else. They have to give up the idea of forcing other people to obey. But you can have any belief you want, and you bring people together. So I think that's what's happening now. People are waking up because you've been in a way involved in trying to keep your church open.
Yeah.
So that's a different group than people maybe at Oyster Creek socially, but they were still nice people because the goal was bringing liberty together. So if you want to go to a place where their culture is a little bit different and social issues are different, and that's what I think is great. Once again, people can look, oh yeah. This should be appealing to everybody across the board once they give up, and that's what's happening, give up on the belief that government is capable of taking care of ourselves. And the principle is freedom. It isn't getting better management. We don't just need somebody better at the CDC to tell us what to do and who should be the guinea pigs for new vaccines. No, it's not that. It's just getting the government out of that and let somebody else make the decision. The closer to home, the better.
Yeah, and you talk about doctors being involved in politics. Well, it sort of reminds you of the neocons, Fauci and his crew. The neocons are always wrong in everything they say. They're proven wrong. And this is what Fauci was, from the very beginning. 2 million are going to die. 200,000 are going to die. You're all going to die if you don't do exactly what I say. Over and over. Oh, you got to flatten the curve so the hospitals won't be overwhelmed. Well, they're not overwhelmed. Well, you still have to keep staying home. You still have to be locked down. So on it goes. The people are wrong. And then when you want to have some alternative voices, let's hear from some doctors who are actually doctors. Oh, no, we got to shut them down. YouTube, all the social media, they get a call from the experts. Nope. You can only have doctors that agree with the World Health Organization, which, by the way, is funded by Gates, and the CDC, which is funded by Gates. These are the only guys that are allowed a voice. And that's the real problem here, I think.
Right. And one other thing that we talk about a lot is what role the media plays, and they have an agenda. And if it's a discussion of chloroquine, they have their opinion. I happen to think it's probably a decent drug. I have not prescribed it. I don't know a lot about it, but I don't think a bureaucrat has the legal authority to do with it. I don't think they have the knowledge to do with it, and I think it should be a scientific subject. But when you go to the media, it depends on what party you belong to.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, chloroquine. Oh, he's going to kill people. He's doing this. He doesn't care about killing people. It turns into a political squabble, and it shouldn't exist. It should be purely scientific, and it's worse now than ever. But I'd like to help discredit the people who pretend that they know everything in medicine, and that they will make the decision on what drugs are going to be used and how many many immunizations you need, and then you get into the politics. Oh, you mean I have to have something in my arm in order to get on an airplane?
Yeah.
And if we're not careful, and if we don't wake up a lot more people, that's what's coming. Gates is not going to give up easily, and I guess he has a lot of influence with his money. But I think the stage is set for people questioning what's happening, and I hope that we can do our job and do the best we can to explain to people that nobody has perfect knowledge. We don't have perfect knowledge, but we have an example of how you solve difficult problems. And it's not by rich people or powerful politicians, and it's not by people squealing on their neighbors in order to get points with the authorities.
Yeah.
That isn't it. But there is a way to solve the problems, and of course, that is admitting that there is. You don't say, "Oh, coronavirus doesn't exist." Yeah, it exists, but the amount of fear that it's driven, it was way out of proportion to what it should have been. And I think this is created by politicians and others who have an agenda. And let's just hope that we get more resistance. The resistance is building, and I want to just keep encouraging people. But I like to, do my best to avoid the violence of it. But that means I have to talk to the police. Quit doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the people who believe that we do, they don't go out looking for trouble.
No.
They may have their guns, but the people that are peaceful and having a gun, you never read stories about them out there. It's people who have illegal guns that are out there doing the killing. So the gun isn't the issue, but I think that the real issue is, it's philosophic. What do you believe in? Do you know what liberty is all about? And can you defend liberty by saying that voluntarism works much better? We don't have to depend on authoritarianism and government guns. Those are the guns I want to regulate.
Yeah. Well, you talk about the dangers of rushing to a vaccine, with all the political pressure, and now treating people like human guinea pigs. Hey, let's try this to see if it works, rather than doing it in a systematic way. If we can actually skip the clip and go to the second clip, the one about the swine flu, if we can do that. This is something that you'll remember, Dr. Paul. The swine flu vaccine side effects were so bad that children were like schizophrenics. This is one particular drug that they use for vaccines. So a cautionary tale that this is not the end all. The end all is for us to gain an immunity. And I actually will just close out by talking about, you mentioned also in your last segment, people not giving up, authoritarians not giving up. Well, here's my final clip. Really, really, really bad stuff. If we can put that last one up. This is our favorite Harris County judge, Lena Hidalgo, 29-year-old, not even an attorney. Look what she put up on her Twitter. See a restaurant at full capacity? Businesses open that shouldn't be? Help us save lives. If you see violations of Governor Abbott's orders, please report them. She's encouraging people in Houston to report on their neighbor, to report on a business, get them shut down, destroy them, put them in jail. This woman is power mad. I mean, something has got to be done to get her out of office. Remember she mandated masks, and Governor Abbott said no, and the police said we're not going to enforce this. So she's not giving up, that's for sure.
Right. And everything that the opposition does it's based on fear. They have to scare people, and that's what she's doing. She's scaring people. Save lives, and intimidate the people into believing it. And they've been able to get away with that. But until people get more information, they're basically pretty gullible. The masses generally remain that way, but you have certain people who will stand up. You take your little experience in Oyster Creek. You have one individual that's been standing up. She gets hundreds of people out, and a lot of other people have read about it. So then the people come together. So it's the people who do stand up and have a principled stand, but eventually you have to have support, and numbers are important, but that's secondary to knowing what you believe in. And I think it's so much better. to defend what we're talking about on the principles of individual sovereignty, individual liberty, and instead of saying, you know, they're ruining my business, which they are. If it's strictly, you know, a commercial thing, which is legitimate, they should be. Well, I mean, she mentions her right to stay open, but she mentions the fact they're going to close my business down. You know, even if they come and why shouldn't I do this? They come and put me in jail, I still lose everything. If I don't, I lose everything. But I think what she has done, because it's gotten the attention of a lot of people, that this is the way to do, is to spread a message. Finally, numbers work, and you showed the numbers showing up on the beaches. I mean, that's fantastic. So people need a little encouragement, and I think what I've noticed over the years is that sometimes when people, and sometimes it happens for me, that when you say something that you feel strongly about, all of a sudden, there's a lot of other people said, you know, he's right about this. And this is I think it's out there. I think people, when they look at this crazy stuff that's going on with coronavirus and the Federal Reserve, well, this is absolutely crazy. Well, whoever thought that they could print $1 trillion every day, literally, you know, every day, and it was going to solve the problem? Well, it's craziness, and all this lockdown is crazy, especially if there's a pretense that we have a constitution and a pretense that we're supposed to take care of ourselves. So to me, I think that the obvious answer is just look around and see how failed the whole system is, whether it's in foreign policy, monetary policy, fiscal policy, or protection of civil liberties. They're not doing that, and we have to do that. We as individuals have to believe in it, and it is true. There are times you have to make a decision that when you stand up, you risk a little bit too, but you risk a lot more sometimes if you say nothing. You know, they say, well, you can't do this. You might lose your liberties. Well, you might lose your liberties if you don't say something. So, but we're still hoping and betting, and we will continue to pursue it because the resistance is building, and this is good, and people have to know why they should do it and why they have to get more people involved. They have to work with their email lists and just say there are answers to this, and it's not strange, it's not authoritarian, and things are better. I often wondered, how is it that we can lose this argument? We should never lose the argument because we believe in personal liberty, property, and all those good things. And it produces the most prosperity, and it produces the largest middle class. It produces the happiest world. But on the short run, the demagogues win by saying, I can give you this immediately and you don't have to work. And even, you know, during this episode, people say, well, I don't want my job back. I'm still going to wait until I get my money from the government. So it's, in a practical way, people should look at it, and we should not lose this argument because it is, in many ways, what America was supposed to be all about, you know, individual liberty and responsibility. So it's available to us. We're still able to talk about it, and that's really work hard. When you start thinking about people can snitch on us if this continues, that's bad news. That's bad news for us because most of the time you never find out who it was unless you find out a whole generation later that somebody snitched on your family. So I think it's believing in liberty and understanding why it's so beneficial and so practical and based on a moral principle. And you can be very much pro-American by doing this, and you haven't caused harm because people say, oh, if you do such and such, somebody's going to die from that. That's just demagoguery. It's lying, and they're wrong. So we have to counteract that by just sticking to the principles that we have that founded this country, and that is the principles of personal liberty and personal responsibility. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Please come back soon.